Pay attention to the passionate scene. It's almost like in an 18-band movie, where a gangster stumbles upon his prey, and he forcefully pins them against a wall and kisses them to his heart's content. It's even shameful to bring him home and handcuff him tightly to the bed, using whips, candles, and other props one by one, making the little tid dog so horny that he wants to interact passionately with his boss night after night. So how did the two meet by chance? It goes back to the ritual of the little milk dog's lost love. After King, the hero, is rejected for confessing his love to his sweetheart, he is drinking alone in a bar, trying to digest the pain caused by his lost love. Meanwhile, a lad, covered in bruises, is taken out of the room of Amo, the other male lead, by his bodyguard. He is a famous Thai business tycoon and a gangster. Not only that, but he also has some special fetishes in the 18 forbidden areas that few can satisfy. The next day, King is still feeling the pain at the bar, saddened by the dynamics of his sweetheart's announcement of a relationship. At that moment, Amo passed by him, and although the two only locked eyes for a few brief seconds, they already understood each other's intentions. One is intrigued by the simple and innocent King, and the other wants to get over his crush through passion. With that, the two hit it off. Still, Amo has principles, and he repeatedly checks to make sure King is drunk. When he got negative answer after negative answer, he stopped holding back and just hugged King and took him back to his room. Under Amo's guidance, King embarks on the first special experience of his life. Whether it was a candle or a small whip, he took it all. With that kind of feat and experience, Amo is also happy that this is who he wants. So after it's over, Amo tells King that this won't be the last time that to see each other. Early the next morning, a sober King rushed to escape back home. Thinking about last night's scene, he couldn't help but Google it and learn about special fetishes. At this point, Amo has gotten all of King's information and understands that the other side is doing an audit. Of course, he also got the other party's address, and he went straight to King's company. After learning that King had shown up for work, Amo quickly left again. Thinking about it, King wouldn't dare to come to the company if he was covered in marks. Co-workers rushed to contact King to tell him about someone coming to see him. Just then King heard the doorbell ring, and Amo was already at the door. King immediately tries to close the door when he sees Amo, but it's not like the bodyguards can't just stand by and watch their boss get turned away. The crowd moves in and Amo gets inside easily. He informs King that he wants him to live with him. King sees this and starts pretending to have amnesia, but Amo, being who she is, immediately uses last night's excitement to jog King's memory. But don't you remember our passionate interaction last night? Nor do you remember our various 18-band movie antics. Where does that leave King? Seeing that he's about to fall, the bodyguard tells Amo about the fire in the company's warehouse, and Amo has to go back to take care of work stuff first. But this time, he remembered to send bodyguards to take care of King. Soon the fire was under control, thanks to the news of his admirer Janice. Amo has known for a long time that it is Daniel who is counting on him, but he does not turn on the other man. He has more important things to do right now and has to make a trip to Korea. Before he left, the only thing he was relieved about was King. The bodyguard taking care of King gets the message and tries to bring it to King, but the other guy doesn't want to hear it or cooperate. What they didn't see was King's smile when he heard that Amo was coming to pick himself up for dinner in a couple days. Oh, love does come so fast, it really catches you off guard. Early the next morning, Amo boarded a private jet to South Korea. As planned, after rounds and rounds of professional negotiations, he managed to take the other side's investment, so Amo made it back home at the appointed time without incident. King finally went to work after a long break at home. His co-workers were thrilled to see him, and King accepted the job with an eye for detail and promised everyone lunch. But by meal time, he no longer had the energy to invite his co-workers to dinner. A suitor comes to invite lunch, and then Amo, a gangster, comes to assert his sovereignty, leaving King scrambling. But in the end is the boss of the gang. Amo is not good words negotiation. He directly take coercive measures. King sees this and has to promise Amo first. Amo takes King to the restaurant where they first met and thoughtfully prepares the other's favorite Japanese food. King doesn't understand why the other party is so entangled in what was clearly an accident, and is relentless in insisting that King live with him. Just as he was about to continue his explanation, a company emergency forced him to leave first. While Amo takes care of things, King is still torn about moving in with him. King finds that spending time with Amo takes his mind off the pain of his sweetheart's rejection of him, but he still can't get over the fact that he just had sex and moved in together. So faced with Amo's call, King chose to ignore it. Since King wasn't answering his phone, Amo had to call the office to remind him that the deadline for consideration was approaching. When the time comes, Amo is going to pick King up. Seeing that his opponent was pushing so hard, King was very torn, so he teamed up with two beautiful co-workers and came up with a plan to get rid of the tiger and sneak out. On the other hand, Amo learns of King's sneak peek after taking care of things at work. He really felt helpless and amused, and had to sigh again that he really was the one he wanted. King didn't realize that he would soon meet Amo again. He thinks Amo is very angry that he's stalking him, and our mob boss has a pretty good temper. He explains again and again that he just happened to be here by chance and knows that King wants to use himself and forget about the others, but he doesn't mind and even encourages the other guy to do so. After this conversation, King is clearly spoken for by Amo. So, without dinner, the two of them hoofed it back to their house and started living together. It's been an exhausting day and King wants to rest, but he doesn't realize that the room Amo has set him up in is his own bedroom. King tries to refuse, but it's no use, as the strong Amo starts with a kiss and cuddle, and the scene gets progressively more exciting. Afterward, the two hugged and slept, even though Amo looks like he's asleep. As soon as King leaves, he'll get his opponent back. Early the next morning, the two woke up one after the other, but King looks at the big tiger behind the boss and wonders. Amo told King that it was his pet and said nothing else. Immediately afterward, Amo takes King to get to know the family. To no one's surprise, Amo went right out and opened up about King being his lover, and it's still comforting to see that he's not squirming or hiding. In addition to the bodyguard and butler in the house, there is a grandson of the butler. As soon as King sees that the two are of opposite ages, he offers to let him familiarize himself with the villa, and Amo doesn't object. The two just walked around the villa. As they talked, they got to know each other a little better. I didn't realize that King and Dash were both a little afraid of Amo. Since it's in a villa area, King doesn't want people following him, so he threatens the bodyguard, and Amo is a little upset to learn about it. He's just worried that the other guy will get hurt because of him. After communication, however, the two decided to each take a step back. When out and about, King allows a bodyguard to follow him, but inside the villa, he demands to be able to move freely on his own. When it was time for dinner, Amo and King went downstairs to the dining room. Eating for two is a bit monotonous. King invites the bodyguard to sit down with Dash, and Amo doesn't object. It's just that he's so used to being a leader that he always speaks with a commanding tone. People can't tolerate it. King can't, and so, when the dining room of the old black glass family was joined by the lovely King, the atmosphere became even more cozy. After dinner, Amo had work to take care of. King didn't say anything, but waited in silence until himself and the little flying twin fell asleep together on the couch. Amo comes out from his work and sees this scene and feels very cozy. After his previous experience of losing his temper, now whatever he wanted to do, he would always ask King about it in advance, and this time King didn't refuse his partner's offer of a hug. It is certainly the warmest comfort after a hard day's work, and such thoughtful behavior from the other man reminded King of his own days of courting others. I can only say that one-sided likes really make it very hard. The night of passion passed and King woke up happily the next morning. When he hears that Amo has tigers in his yard, he's curious to see them, but as the king of all beasts, even if raised in a cage the tiger is also very fierce. Almost did not hurt King, but fortunately Amo arrived in time. Despite the scare, Amo is still angry and severely punishes the bodyguard in charge of taking care of King. The two also argued again. King can just go out when he's in Amo's villa, so he has to use the phone to greet his parents and take care of company business. That day, Amo offers to take King out to dinner to apologize for losing his temper that day. King didn't refuse, but offered to go out shopping. How could a mob boss travel in a bad row? But this made King uncomfortable. So, as King is about to relent, Amo makes a concession and goes off to wait with his bodyguard himself. Meanwhile, Amo's rivals, Daniel and others, have discovered King's presence and are speculating whether this could be Amo's breaking point. It's better to wait passively than to be proactive. So he goes to see Amo and coincidentally meets King. King finished his shopping and went to have dinner with Amo. On the other hand, Daniel brings Janice, Amo's love interest, to the same restaurant. He lets Janice watch the two get intimate and uses the opportunity to offer to work together. Just cooperate to get rid of King. Then Amo will naturally start liking Janice. The bait was so tantalizing that Janice didn't hesitate and just said yes. At this point, Amo is unaware of Janice's transformation and is still concerned about how King is doing with his stay, but he left sulking in the face of the other's cold attitude. On this day, King comes to the mall again for shopping. Not to mention Daniel is quite persistent and encounters King once again. He hands him the invitation to the party and uses Amo's job as bait to entice him to go. Meanwhile, Amo beats Daniel in business, so he doesn't really want to go to the party. But Daniel still has Janice as a teammate, and she tells Amo that the banquet must come or risk abortion. Amo thinks about how Daniel dared to send invitations to King as well and decides to teach him a lesson. Soon it's time for the party to be held, and Amo forbids King to go, so he takes the other party's invitation himself. But he didn't realize that King had quietly followed him even after he reached the grounds. Janice, who was at the venue at this time, was also very much on top of his game. After King arrives, she gets someone to arrest him straight away. For tonight's party, Daniel has invited a lot of people in power in politics and business, and is planning to bribe them with money. But as he was about to unveil the little gift surprise, Amo walked on stage and took direct control. Amo tells them that the little boxes everyone is holding are bombs, but not to worry, as long as they leave in an orderly fashion, they won't explode. And Daniel is afraid to say anything at this point because he has such a bomb in his hands. With that, Amo skillfully solves Daniel's dilemma of wanting to join forces with the political community. But that's when the henchman suddenly told him that King had lost it. Amo has no desire to fight and has to leave Daniel alone for a while to find King. And at this point, King is being tortured by Amo's suitors and has been injured. Luckily, Amo wasn't too late and had more than enough men with him to get King out without too much trouble. At the same time, it makes King's heart sing for it. The next day's newspapers also reported Daniel's incident, except that no bomb was found at the scene. Turns out it was all a ploy by Amo. But after this incident, the relationship between the two was much closer and more cordial, so King couldn't resist making his wish. And it turns out that the two big tigers in the backyard intrigued King a lot. And that small request, Amo was still more than willing to fulfill him. So the two went out to the backyard and got close to the big tiger for a while. Next, Amo has work. However, King wanted to go this time too, and he promised he wouldn't wander off. So the two came to the bar. Everything was going well, but at the end of the day, the pretty sister gives King a drink, but it makes Amo very jealous. With that in mind, the two walked out of the bar, but to their surprise, two killers came at them head-on and shot at them. Faced with such an emergency, Amo has to take King and hide back first, and calls his best friend James, hoping that King will live with him for a while. With the crisis temporarily averted, Amo sends King back to the villa. However, King wants to face it with the other, and once again, the two have a disagreement. King is getting upset again, though he's still alone and living a normal life. His behavior of expecting Amo to show up every time he hears the door open reveals a small part of his mind. Some more time passed and Amo was still busy with things in the company, but he didn't forget that he was going to send King to James. King was very angry to hear such a decision, sending people away at the drop of a hat, as Janice once said, and getting yourself kicked out of Amo. Buddy, I'm not saying you're overthinking it. From the moment he heard the decision, King refused to speak to Amo, but he was powerless to resist and had to follow the arrangements to find James, the object of his former affection, who knows that at this time, James is on vacation with his boyfriend and his kids. But the other man didn't care, and King was too busy being sad. For James, he has no nonconformity. Overall, the atmosphere was pretty good. The only sad thing is Amo, because King totally doesn't want to talk to him anymore, doesn't answer his phone calls, and doesn't respond to his texts. It's hard on King's heart to give Amo such a cold shoulder. Though, after all, he watched other people's young couples get intimate, while his own boyfriend put himself out here. This went on for some time. On this day, Amo finally couldn't resist calling King and wanting to talk, but King continues to be uncooperative, and Amo has to spend time alone for the time being. Toward the end of the night, Amo comes home and sees the maid, who gets along well with King, and tries to test the other side to see if they're still angry. So Amo told him to make a phone call and turn on the amplification, but before Amo could flex his acting muscles, King found out about it. He then ordered Amo to stop all this and come to himself in person if he wanted to talk. Amo sensed the other's determination and had to end the call. The next day, King and James and a group of others go to the beach, but I didn't realize that when I came back, the kids were sunburned. James leaves his boyfriend and King at home with instructions not to open the door and goes out to get his medication. But when he had just left, King disobeyed and opened the door for someone else. The next second, a group of thugs rushed in, trying to take King away. Luckily, at this critical moment, Amo appeared in time to defeat his opponent and managed to save King. Although there were no serious consequences, King was still very angry. He feels it was Amo's bad decision that dragged James and the others down with him. Amo doesn't retort at this, but instead apologizes seriously and tells King what happened. The two are also finally back together. After settling things with King, it was the turn of today's perpetrator. Despite King's pleas for mercy, Amo teaches them a hard lesson. After making up, the two naturally spent another pleasant evening. They woke up in the morning and also experienced a sweetness that had been missing for a long time. But Amo has things to do today, and he's going to send those perpetrators back to Daniel. King refuses to stop when he hears about it and has to go along, so the two boarded the plane back. Daniel sees his subordinate and doesn't want to admit it, but Amo doesn't care, drops it and walks away. And at this point, King surprisingly rushes out of the car and punches Daniel without explanation. As it turns out, he was upset with them for hurting the kids. King, this move kana genius is shocking to Now that the perpetrator has been dealt with, there's no need for King to go back, so the two return to their home after a long absence. After recent events, Amo and King's relationship has grown again. The two can now be said to be in love. King has all started trying to cook for Amo, and Amo is feeling very happy with Amo right now. But ordinary life is always going to have some hiccups. That night, Janice is always calling Amo, and although he doesn't answer, it seems that Janice comes to the villa late at night. Early the next morning, King was finally able to return to work again. It was still protected by bodyguards, but he was satisfied. He first sent Faye to school, only to hear from the other that Janice had come to the villa last night. King returned to work after a long absence, and his co-workers were happy to see him. Amo agrees with the idea of her boyfriend working, but phone calls of concern and in-person visits, that's one and all. And for King nowadays, such behavior is no longer a bondage, but a sweet daily routine between a young couple. So even in the office, there's no stopping the two from interacting intimately. But unbeknownst to them, Daniel is up to something again. This time, though, it looks like he's got something up his sleeve. Amo takes King back home, and together, they make their way to the tiger house. Who could resist the mighty and dominant white tiger? And King is no exception. With Amo's escort, he was also able to get up close and personal with the little white tiger. But peace is always so short-lived, and soon Amo gets word that Daniel is up to something. But while these were a bit tricky, they weren't so tricky that he couldn't do anything about it. After all, he had help behind him. But there's an uninvited guest over there too. Leo. The two had a temporary relationship where they lived together, and today Leo wants to renew their relationship. But luckily, Amo is sensible and decisively rejects his partner. After settling things, he returned home where his own boyfriend was taking a shower. He couldn't resist coming up for a kiss and a touch, and had confessed something about his past. King was a little touched by the sight, so he wanted to confess as well. But Amo doesn't care about that, only about the future, and just wants to make sure that she's the only one in his heart. By late afternoon, it should be time to do something juvenile, but work calls Amo. The scene changes and Janice finds Amo. She has information to give him, but Amo won't take it directly. He honestly tells Janice that he can only be friends with the other guy. If Janice wants more, this is information he'd rather not have. Maybe love is seeing your favorite person happy. So this time, Janice didn't ask for anything in return, but helped the other person get this information as a friend. Amo's job has become much easier as a result. Leo is even more furious when he gets a picture of King being joyful and playing. And then there is a blooper. We do not know the boss's bodyguard, and the boss is not the same sexual orientation. Anyway, these three muscle men together to experience indescribable things. Amo and King's side aren't left behind, and King senses his partner's moping and offers a drink. But how can King be a match for Amo? It doesn't take long for him to get himself drunk. So while they were drunk, the two of them once again revisited their special hobby and the exciting juvenile images from the beginning. On the other hand, Daniel realizes that Janice has betrayed him and takes her back in anger. The scene shifts back to King and Amo, who are experiencing years of peace and quiet, as well as exchanging tips on the exercise they just did. But unbeknownst to King, a large group of people poured into the villa at that moment, only to be stopped by Amo's men. The next morning, instead of preferring to sleep in because of their fatigue, Amo and King got up early to watch the sunrise in a very moody way. Not only that, but the two cooked a sweet breakfast together, and the gangster, who has been in the middle of all sorts of intrigues, enjoys a calm and sweet life after a long time. Vacation time is fun, but it ends quickly. On this day, Amo returned home with a party. By the time he reached the door, he would have sweetly hugged his boyfriend back to his room, but to their surprise, the two men enter only to find an uninvited guest, the same Leo, lying on the large, familiar bed. Although Leo's arrival breaks the sweetness of the two, King doesn't lose his temper and does what his master should do. He didn't take offense to the other man and politely invited Leo into another room. Such a resourceful approach to the situation was also appreciated by Amo. Just because Leo was ousted doesn't mean he's given up. He decides to secretly investigate King. King's life has been very enjoyable lately, with sweet love and feeding the tigers. It's been a real treat. The scene shifts to Leo just getting out of the shower and looking at Amo, who walks in and tries to seduce Amo. But how could Amo be the kind of person who has no self-control? He turned down the offer without hesitation, but he didn't realize that King saw the scene before he refused. When it came time to eat, it was simply another, more over-the-top spectacle. Leo is capricious and has constant little tantrums. King is well-behaved and doesn't say anything. In the end, it was Amo who couldn't look away and gave Leo a hard time, and he didn't stop when the other man lost his temper, telling him decisively who King was and how important he was. Luckily, the two believed it. Still, while Amo isn't looking, Leo finds King and threatens to send people to hurt his family and co-workers if he doesn't leave Amo. Seeing Leo's behavior getting out of hand, his brother Tony, the boss behind Amo, comes out to warn him, but Leo still refuses to let go, because he has gotten the fateful news that King and James used to have an emotional affair. He also didn't wait and told Amo very directly about it. His boyfriend and friend, the two, had crossed paths. The incident was so hard on Amo that he couldn't help but want to distance himself from King for the time being. At the same time, he orders his men to find out as soon as possible if King and James have had an intimate relationship. Confronted with Amo's recent coldness, King finally senses something, but he doesn't know what it's because. That's when Leo shows up just in time and spills the beans on what Amo already knows about James and King. Hey, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Boy, are you here to help answer the competitors' questions. King can't help but come to the office to see Amo, who tries to explain his relationship with James, but Amo refuses to listen. He had done it because he was worried about hurting King again, but he didn't expect King to misunderstand it as being because he was angry. But it was so far gone that he had to put things aside for a while and let the other man go home. Instead, he told the bodyguard he couldn't let King out of the house. A heartbroken King returns home and starts packing, but is unable to leave. That's when Leo shows up and says he has a way to get him out of there. Having finally finished feeding the tiger, Leo sends King out of the villa, but before he could leave, a group of men came down from the car next to him to take King away. Leo sees this and tries to save him, so these killers then take the two together. There were 3 chairs in the room, so it didn't take long for Janice to be brought in to join them. After everyone goes through this together, Leo no longer hates King and Janice clears up his misunderstanding. At this point, all they can do is wait for Amo to rescue them. Amo soon gets the message and comes to the rescue of the 3 men with the casino transfer Daniel asked for. But the boss is always the boss. and instead of foolishly going it alone and charging into the enemy's encirclement, he swoops in and takes care of Daniel when he's not looking, finally resolved Daniel's issue and things kind of came to an end. After this hijacking, we all got to know each other. The misunderstanding between Amo and King is explained and everyone forgives Leo's capriciousness. Needless to say, this is the happy ending everyone has been waiting for. 2 months go by and King decides to take Amo home to meet his parents. Even if you were once a gangster, you still have to save face on such occasions. Luckily, King's parents are very enlightened people, and they didn't object to the two being together. They just want two people to live happily and withstand the world. King's family dinner ended on a note of harmony, but when the two returned home, they found it dark. As it turns out, Amo has prepared another elaborate party for King that could be considered a sweet wedding reception for the two. In this way, two people from two different worlds, who met skillfully by fate, eventually cultivated the right fruit and became a good story. Finally, the story ends here. Amo and King kissed sweetly as family and friends looked on. Alright, that's it for today's video. Thank you for your support and watching, and we'll see you in the next installment.